Good afternoon. Welcome to this place of simple beauty and serenity as we gather together to celebrate and remember a remarkable life. I am the Reverend Abhijan Amanchi, and I serve as one of the ministers of this community. On behalf of Jim's family, his wife Ellen, their children Jean and Matt, and his wife Chris, their grandchildren Alicia, Catherine, and Avon, and his brother Patrick and his family, I extend a warm welcome to each of you as we gather to celebrate Jim Kelley's life. Following today's service, you're invited to join the family in the fellowship hall for a memorial reception. It'll be a time to share memories and stories and the love that Jim brought into all our lives. Saying goodbye to someone as deeply respected and cherished as Jim is never easy. Today we grieve alongside his family, feeling the profound loss of a beloved husband, father, grandfather, brother, uncle, mentor, co-religionist, and friend. Jim was a source of joy and vitality in everything he touched. And as we honor his life, we also acknowledge the personal loss we feel in his absence. For those who are new to a Unitarian Universalist congregation, a special welcome. Our tradition is rooted in the Protestant congregational heritage, but over a century ago, we chose to build our religious community not on uniformity of belief, but on the promises we make to respect and care for one another. As a non-creedal community, we honor religious wisdom wherever it is found, in the great traditions of the world, in the insights of science and nature, and in the depths of our own hearts. So in this spirit, we approach our memorial services not as proclamations of faith, but as celebrations of a life well lived. Each of us brings our own understanding of life's mysteries, and we honor these perspectives as sources of consolation and meaning in times of loss. So this afternoon, through words and stories, music and song, we will weave a tapestry of Jim Kelley's life. While no single hour can fully encompass the richness of his 83 years, we will celebrate the love he shared, the values he stood for, and the communities he helped build. And in doing so, may we be inspired to live our own lives with integrity, joy, and love. We begin our service by lighting a flame in honor of Jim, a flame that symbolizes memory, hope, and the enduring light he brought to our lives. This chalice, the symbol of our free faith, reminds us that every life is sacred from its beginning to its end. And today, this flame represents the shared community we create in grief and celebration. It signifies the ongoing life and love and connection that Jim inspired. So as Catherine and Avon come forward to kindle our chalice, I invite us to rise in body or in spirit and join in the words that are printed in your order of service. Please join with me. We light this chalice in loving memory of our beloved friend and spiritual companion, Jim Kelley, and in tribute to the love a single life can inspire. May the chalice remind us of the extravagant gift of life. May it signify the community we create in our being together and our sharing together. You may be seated.
When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder, lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants lumber after safety. When great trees fall in forests, small things recoil into silence, their senses eroded beyond fear.
When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. We breathe briefly. Our eyes briefly see with a hurtful clarity. Our memory, suddenly sharpened, examines, gnaws on kind words unsaid, promised walks never taken.
Great souls die, and our reality, bound to them, takes leave of us. Our souls, dependent on their nurture, now shrink, wizened. Our minds, formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. We are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves.
And when great souls die, after a period, peace blooms, slowly and always irregularly. Spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration. Our senses restored, never to be the same, whisper to us. They existed. They existed. We can be and be better, for they existed.
Beautiful. Thank you. Please rise in body or in spirit to sing hymn number 16, "'Tis a Gift to be Simple." The details of a person's life do not fully encompass the depth, richness of that person's life, but the details are a good place to begin. James Edward Kelley was born on April 22nd, 1941, in Des Moines, Iowa, to Edward J. Kelley and Helen Schroeder Kelley. He was the eldest of 3 siblings, with a brother Patrick and a sister Kitty. His father, Edward J. Kelley, served as a judge in Iowa, setting a precedent that Jim would later follow in his own distinguished career. Jim spent his formative years in Ames, Iowa, where he achieved the rank of Eagle Scout, reflecting his early commitment to leadership and community service. He graduated from Ames High School in 1959, where he met his future wife, Ellen Packer. Pursuing higher education, Jim attended the University of Notre Dame, playing trumpet in both the marching and concert bands, and graduated in 1963. He then earned his JD from the University of Iowa College of Law, serving as editor of the Iowa Law Review. In 1964, Ellen and Jim married and honeymooned in England and Ireland. They welcomed their daughter Jean in 1966 and their son Matt in 1969. Jim began his legal career at the firm Lane and Waterman in Davenport, Iowa, where he became a partner. In 1981, he was appointed as a state district court judge in Iowa's 7th Judicial District. following in his father's footsteps. He earned a master's degree in judicial studies from the University of Nevada, Reno, in 1993. During his nearly 30 years on the bench, Jim earned a national reputation for innovation and compassion. His influential 1994 Drake Law Review article advocated for judicial debriefing of jurors in difficult cases, a groundbreaking method to alleviate stress and PTSD symptoms. This model was widely adopted across the country and remains a testament to Jim's commitment to improving the judicial process. He also spearheaded the digitization of court records in Scott County, making it the first in Iowa to transition to an all-digital system. Jim served as president of the Iowa Judges Association from 1996 to 97 and chaired several committees on jury standards and records management. A lover of classical music, Jim and Ellen were longtime members of the Handel Oratorio Society in the Quad Cities, participating annually in the Messiah performances. He also had a passion for the outdoors and photography, amassing a collection of landscape photos from his travels. Jim also embraced adventure. In the late 1970s, he became an instrument-rated pilot, taking his family on memorable flights that added a sense of excitement to their lives. A sense of excitement. His love for the outdoors was reflected in his photography, hiking, and fishing, capturing the beauty of nature in every season. Jim had a deep love for plants and gardening, cultivating an extensive garden at his Bettendorf home filled with hostas, flowers, and rare conifers. He served as a regional president of the American Conifer Society. Faith and community were central to Jim's life. Raised Roman Catholic, he later found alignment with Unitarian Universalist principles, becoming an active leader in the Unitarian Universalist congregation of the Quad Cities. After retiring in 2011, Jim and Ellen moved to Maryland in 2013 to be closer to their grandchildren. At Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist congregation, they sang in the choir, contributed to the grounds team, and created a welcome garden at the front of the sanctuary of the main building, continuing their legacy of service and connection. Jim's later years brought significant health challenges. A stroke in 2015 caused aphasia, and in 2018, while supporting Ellen during a medical crisis in Denver, Colorado, Jim suffered a massive stroke that required emergency brain surgery. These challenges ultimately led to vascular dementia, and Jim moved into memory care at the Village at Rockville, where he received loving support until his passing on October 26, 2024. Jim's life was a testament to his values, his dedication to his family, his passion for justice, and his love of music, his love of nature, and his commitment to the communities he served. He lived fully, loved deeply, and left the world a better place through his work, his relationships, and his example. He will be deeply missed and lovingly remembered.
I've got lots of notes here about Jim and me growing up, but I'll just speak to you from the heart. Oops, no place to put them. Jim was born on April 22nd, 1941, which is the anniversary of the birth of Immanuel Kant, in my view, the best philosopher of the 18th century. I was born on July 24th, 1943, which is a less auspicious date because it commemorates the invasion of Cuba by Fidel Castro and his revolutionaries, leading to the communist regime in Cuba. which we all have maybe different views of. I think it was a murderous, unjust regime. Others may have different views. And we're here in a Unitarian church, after all, so all views are appropriate, although you're wrong. I'd like to share with you some of my early memories, enlightened by my mother's diary entries about the development of her children. I'd like to talk first about those. Dad, as executor of Mom's estate after she died in 1976, shared with us her book, which was printed sort of your children from 1 through 5. And she had notes about each of us as we were growing up. Jim's and Kitty's, who was 2 years younger than me, were obedient, loving children, model children. But when she came to me, it was like despair, bleak. She said things like, Pat just doesn't care whether his diaper is wet. And he's not obedient. He doesn't pay attention when I tell him what to do. And this troubled her a great deal. And my memories are consistent with that. I had trouble with what I call to my children the first rule of civilized behavior, which is no hitting. I remember when Jim was 6 or 7 and I was 4 or 5, a neighbor kid, his last name was Trump, had hit Jim, and I ran and knocked him to the ground. And this disturbed my mother because, she didn't want to have a violent child. And she figured out that because I didn't really pay attention to what she wanted me to do, that she would leave it to Jim. And so she urged Jim to take care of me whenever Jim went out with me, and Jim took that to heart. And he took good care of me. I remember, just an example, when we were visiting my grandmother in a little town called Wellman, Iowa, where she owned and ran a hotel. Jim and I were walking by the fenced pastures south of town, and we saw some boys much older than us riding horses in one of the pastures. And so we went up and talked to them, and I asked them if we could ride one of their horses. And one of their leaders said, yes, if you two fight. And I was all for it. And Jim said, no, I'd rather not, and ushered me away from these major or minor to be hoodlums. Then this worked fine until we got to high school and we sort of fell apart. I was a sophomore when Jim was a senior. The first dance we both went to, I got home about 1 o'clock. Jim had gotten home at 11, and I asked where Dad was, and Mom said, well, he's out riding around looking for you on the streets of Ames. So Jim was, of course, we both worked hard, studied hard, and got good grades, but Jim's extracurricular activities were much more appropriate than mine. He was a member of the marching band and the concert band, where he played trumpet in both. And he was the lead, a very demanding lead, in the play Ponder Heart, which is a senior class play, where he was in almost every scene and had more dialogue than anybody else in the play, and did a superb job, of course. After high school, Jim went off to Notre Dame, and my first year I went to Creighton University. I thought they wanted me because they gave me a scholarship. Well, who cares? Anyway, but I followed Jim then for my sophomore year, and we met we went to school together, of course, and Jim somehow had arranged to have a meeting with this wise old priest who was the Dean of Academic Affairs at Notre Dame, and he advised me and got me into all the best teachers in the sophomore curriculum at Notre Dame. And my first year there, I had a very enjoyable, wonderful time with exciting and challenging courses, which eventually, I think, led to my career as an academic. Jim has been a major influence on my life. He took care of me when we were growing up, and he's been a friend and example to me as I've grown older. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you all for coming. It's great to see all of you. This is a celebration of my dad's life, and there's a lot to celebrate. When I was a young child, I appreciated Dad for the fun we had and the time we spent together. Every Saturday morning, he would take me or Jean out for breakfast, alternating between the two of us. It was not only a great time to try all of the pancakes available at Village Inn, but a wonderful one-on-one conversation about what was going on in our lives. I didn't truly grasp the love and commitment that showed until I had children of my own, and I've tried to share that with my kids as well. He would read to my sister and me, Treasure Island or Winnie the Pooh, doing funny voices like Piglets. Help, help, a horrible heffalump! On vacations, we would spend lots of times outdoors, hiking, fishing, skiing. As mentioned, Dad got his pilot's license when I was in elementary school. And he would take us for single-engine plane rides. I can still remember him shouting, "Clear!" out the window before he started the propeller. There was one time when the landing gear didn't work, and he had to hand crank a crank next to the pilot's seat to get the landing gear to work. He was so calm and matter-of-fact about it that I wasn't worried. Looking back, I don't know how he did it. My father was also a great source of dad humor before it was recognized as its own genre. I'll never forget how we'd get in the car and he'd say, "We're off like a thundering herd of turtles." Or in other contexts, "I see," said the blind man as he picked up the hammer and saw. There was singing, lots of singing. There were songs in church and Christmas carols with friends. And every year, right around this time, there was Handel's Messiah. Mom and Dad were in a community oratorio society that put on a production every year at Augustana College. There was lots of other music too. We went to other classical music concerts. When it came time for me to learn an instrument, Dad loaned me the cornet he played in high school and college, and that's how I learned how to play the trumpet. Jean got a flute to play as well. Dad would take Jean and me over to Augustana for lessons with music education students there. It didn't occur to me then, but I know now, what a commitment that was to us kids. It may seem like a small thing, but without it, I wouldn't have the love for music that I do, and my daughter Catherine may never have found her calling as a music teacher. All of the students that Catherine teaches are part of Dad's legacy. In my adolescence, I started to appreciate the more abstract, more grown-up aspects of our father-son relationship. We'd get at least 2 newspapers every day, the Des Moines Register and the Quad City Times. We'd listen to NPR on the drive to and from school and at dinner time. I was probably the most knowledgeable 12-year-old in Iowa about current events. I distinctly remember hearing about a confirmation hearing of a Reagan administration foreign affairs official who couldn't remember the name of an African leader. That's easy, Robert Mugabe, I said. Wow. And Dad gently reminded me that not everyone was as well informed as I was. And that was something that I hadn't really thought about until then. Dad really ignited my passion for news, for journalism, for the First Amendment. Thanks to that foundation, I had the honor of working as an intern in college at the Des Moines Register, and now representing NPR and other news organizations as an attorney. That's part of Dad's legacy, too. As I grew older, we would discuss the cases he was involved with and the law. He was great at guiding gently and teaching the importance of precision and logical thinking. One reason Dad loved being a judge is because he had a strong sense of justice. When he talked about his work, it was clear that he cared about everyone in the courthouse, from the bailiffs and court reporters, to the jurors, to the crime victims and divorcing couples and lawyers, and the criminal defendants. I remember once visiting his chambers where he showed me a letter from an inmate at the county jail that threatened him and the sheriff in words that were clearly indicative of mental illness. Instead of mocking this man or saying how terrible it was that he was threatening these public officials, Dad expressed how it was saddening that the man wasn't getting the mental health treatment that he needed. Throughout his work, Dad showed by example that compassion is an essential element of justice. Otherwise, it's just vengeance. To say that he cared about criminal defendants, that he had compassion for them, is not to say that he was soft on crime or too lenient. It means that he saw them as human beings, some of them who had done terrible things, and thus needed to be treated justly and prevented from committing further crimes. Dad's the reason that I became a lawyer. He instilled in me his sense of justice and fairness, his value of precision and clear thinking, and, underlying it all, his compassion. I know I'm not perfect, I'm fallible, just like he was. But every day in my work as a lawyer, I strive to live up to the values and ideals that he taught me. As an adult, my understanding and appreciation for what Dad taught me further deepened. He was not set in his ways. He grew, evolved, adapted. In his later years, he changed from a church-going Catholic, meat-eating Republican to a Unitarian, vegetarian progressive. Mom and Dad found community in the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Iowa, and they found a loving, caring community here at Cedar Lane, and I know that he was so grateful for the friendships he made here and for all of the support that everyone gave when he could no longer appear in person. It's been difficult these past few years seeing Dad's health decline, but I'm grateful that I and our family have had the opportunity to give back just a little bit of what he gave to us, to show him the dedication, compassion, and love that he instilled in us. I'd like to close with a story that was told many times when I was growing up. Every year in Iowa, there's an all-state band, orchestra, and chorus. High school students from across the state go to audition for the opportunity to make music with the best of their peers. I believe that Dad and Mom were both in the all-state chorus when they were in high school. The all-state concert is in Des Moines every winter. I don't know if this was the year Mom and Dad were there, but one year a winter storm blew in during the concert. It knocked out the power and the lights went out. But the chorus just kept singing. They knew the music so well and worked together as an ensemble so well that they didn't need to see the music or the conductor to finish their performance. The moral of that story is what I'd like to leave you with today. As we say goodbye to my father, a compassionate and principled man, someone who could be depended on, someone who made me the man that I am today. When the lights go out, keep singing.
sparrow. The first thing I heard early that morning was a rapid flapping sound, soft but insistent, wings against glass. As it turned out, when I got downstairs and saw the small bird rioting in the flame of a high window, trying to hurl itself through the mystery of glass and pass into the spacious light.
On the rug in a warm slot of sunlight, told me how the bird had gotten inside, carried in the night through the flap of a secret basement door, and later released from the soft grip of his mouth.
Upon a chair, I trapped its pulsations in a shirt and got it to the door. So weightless it seemed to have vanished into the nest of cloth. But outside, when I uncupped my hands, it bolted into its element, dropping over the dormant garden in a spasm of wing beats, then disappearing over a row of tall hemlocks.
For the rest of the day, all I could feel was its wild thrumming against my palms, and all I could think about were the hours it must have spent, pent in the silent shadows of that room, hidden in the spiky branches of our decorated tree, breathing there among the metallic angels, ceramic apples, stars of yarn, its eyes open, like mine as I lay in bed that night, picturing this rare lucky sparrow tucked into a holly bush now, a light snow tumbling through the windless dark.
Good afternoon. I am Tim Persons, a member of this congregation and a friend of Jim's. I'm not sure when I met Jim. As I recall, the word around Cedar Lane was that a lawyer and his wife had joined the congregation. I heard this from some of the other attorneys here, and as it turns out, I am one of them. I do recall, though, an early conversation with Judge Kelley. He was so approachable and pleasant. He wanted to know what I did, where I came from, and in the time-honored tradition of Unitarian Universalists, how it was that I became a UU. I found Jim immediately interesting and someone I'd like to get to know better, and I did, and I'm extremely grateful that I did. His wonderful wife, Ellen, and he became quickly integrated into the Cedar Lane family, as you heard from Reverend Abi. Before too long, they had shared their abundant talents and interests with us all. This included the choir, the grounds crew, previously mentioned, and I must add, Ellen shared her incomparable knowledge of plants, especially conifers, in that team. The governance committee and several others. When I learned that they had bought a new car, a Toyota Prius, I thought to myself, yes, they're fitting right in. Jim was amazingly kind, considerate, and thoughtful. He was one of the best listeners I have ever met. And so it was no surprise that Jim joined Cedar Lane's care team, where we served together with the likes of Bob Harrison, Phil Smith, Lou Mayo, and others, we made, in my opinion, a great section of men in the group. Serving with Jim on this ministry team taught me a lot about listening and caring. One of my favorite times with Jim were our Cedar Lane lawyer breakfasts. We would meet every now and then at the Mosaic Restaurant in North Bethesda for Friday breakfasts. Joining in different combinations over the months were fellow Cedar Lane lawyers Don Bliss, Paul Strella, and Perry Seifert. Often we were convulsed with laughter at our breakfasts, sometimes troubled by our discussions of current events. Sound familiar? But we always had a great time in each other's company, and these breakfasts were memorable indeed. I'm sorry to bring this up, Matt, but you may remember, actually, how could you forget, when you joined us older attorneys for what might have seemed an inquisition, but you held your own. Another memorable breakfast, and I know your dad was proud to introduce you to us. You'll hear more about these gatherings in a minute from my fellow member and attorney, Don Bliss. I realized along the way that Jim was a natural teacher. I would often ask him, about his career as a judge because, as far as I could recall, I'd never had a judge as a friend. It was fascinating to learn about the great variety of cases he handled in Iowa. And permit me to add here that I did not know until I read his obituary, and this has been previously mentioned, that Jim pioneered the approach to debrief jurors after significant criminal and other difficult cases. And as we've heard, this helped with the understandable emotional strain experienced by members of a jury. This showed the deep insight that Jim had into the justice system and how ordinary citizens coped with it. This was so typical of the Jim I knew, compassionate and caring. So Jim, the judge and teacher, never missed an opportunity to refresh my legal education, and that happened often enough. Forgive me for a moment while I engage in some shop talk. And for you attorneys in the room here today, there will be a quiz later at the reception. But sometimes Jim would look somewhat sadly at me and slowly shake his head as he reminded me of my not recalling the differences between testimonial and use immunity or the basics of riparian rights, among others. He did give me a pass on the basics of Iowa crop insurance programs, but hinted that it was something I should look into. As time passed, however, it was very difficult to come to grips with the health challenges Ellen and Jim faced. But I witnessed Jim's abundant love for Ellen as she navigated hers. It was during this time also that I saw the incredible care and concern provided by Jean, Matt, and their families. I will be forever grateful for your extraordinary example of love for your mother and father and your devotion and care for them. As aphasia started to limit Jim's ability to speak, I noticed something. Of course, the twinkle in his eye remained, as did his smile and his laughter. And he remained sharp as a tack, of course, but our talk slowly became more and more one-sided. I discovered that as I did more and more of the talking, Jim really didn't need to speak. My great friend and I had come to know each other so well that I was not only finishing his thoughts, but I was starting them too. And he would nod in gratitude and agreement. I will never forget these special moments. And so in closing, I offer the words of the Unitarian Universalist minister Elizabeth Saunter. From the earth comes our life, to the earth we return. We honor you, Jim, child of the earth. In mystery we are born, in mystery we live, and in mystery we die. In mystery we are connected and held in love. Thank you, Jim, for the remarkable example of your life and for your love and friendship. I will miss you dearly.
As Tim mentioned, my name is Don Bliss, and I'm a member of that questionable profession. Those of us Cedar Laners living on the East Coast were blessed when some fresh air blew in from Iowa, and Judge Jim Kelley and Ellen moved to Maryland to be closer to their children and grandchildren. They brought with them some good Midwestern common sense, graciousness, friendliness, and commitment to service that they put right to work here at Cedar Lane. These are qualities that can use some reinforcement in our media-dominated inside the Beltway culture here. I was very fortunate when the judge sought out other attorneys in the congregation, as Tim mentioned, for some conversation and sharing of experiences in the practice of law, and how the law can be and should be an instrument for justice, fairness, and constructive change. Judge Kelley scheduled periodic breakfasts, which Tim and I regularly attended, and other attorneys in the congregation joined us. And as Tim mentioned, we even had a visit by the Kelley's son, Matt, who shared with us his absolutely fantastic practice defending First Amendment free speech. At these breakfasts, I learned a lot about the judge's 30 years as a trial judge and advocate, dispensing justice and working quietly to improve the efficiency of the judicial system, and sometimes working to help the traumatic experiences of jurors. There was a lot of humor, as Tim mentioned, and drama, too, recounting those murder trials that he handled. It's fair to say that the role of lawyers in our society today is not without its critics, and the issue is clearly on the forefront of public discussion today. You all know the lawyer jokes. Why don't sharks attack lawyers? Professional courtesy. Or what's the difference between a lawyer and a vulture? The lawyer gets frequent flyer miles. Regretfully, there are lawyers out there rallying for retribution and preserving and protecting privilege. And then there are lawyers like Judge Kelley who apply the law to realize America's promise. And it's those lawyers, and especially the judges, who represent the highest standards of integrity, ethics, and devotion to the rule of law. It is those lawyers who are the guardrails of democracy that will serve all the people fairly and equitably, and they are so important these days. In our chaotic national political scene, it will be judges and community leaders like Judge Kelley whose passion for the law will keep us blending and bending that arc toward justice. I had the privilege of working with some very fine lawyers and public servants during my career. Few, however, could match the genuine friendliness, openness, and curiosity of Jim Kelley. He truly embodied and lived that second principle of Unitarian Universalism: justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. It was an honor to spend some all too brief time with him.
Thank you, Don, Tim, Matt, and Pat, for your beautiful remembrances of Jim. You know, I met Jim and Ellen before I was called to Cedar Lane. We met in Orlando, Florida, where they were at the ordination of my colleague, Jay Wolin, who had just been called to Davenport, Iowa. And I remember Jim just making a beeline to me after the ordination service, greeting me and letting me know that they were moving to Bethesda, Maryland, and they were looking forward to becoming members at Cedar Lane. That was my first memory of Jim Kelley. And Jim, as Tim shared, was very engaged as a member of the caring team. And this was in the beginning of my ministry here, where we were really growing the caring team, which was the pastoral visitors team. And he was such an involved and engaged member of that team, providing such important caring ministry to members of the congregation. And of course, Jim and Ellen loved singing in the choir and were also part of the Grupo Piccolo, which was an all a cappella ensemble that used to sing every month in our worship services. We heard in the reading earlier from Dr. Maya Angelou that when great trees fall, the air around them changes. It becomes lighter, quieter, and carries an ache for the space they once filled. And yet, even as we grieve their absence, we find comfort in knowing their roots remain deep, intertwined, and shaping the ground beneath us. Jim Kelley was one of those great trees, a steady, strong presence whose roots of love, justice, and service nourished everyone around him. His life enriched this world, offering shade, shelter, and strength to many. His life was grounded in love, with his family at the heart of it all. At the center of that love was his extraordinary relationship with Ellen, his life partner, his soulmate for 65 years. From their beginnings as high school sweethearts to the decades they spent building a life together. Their life and their love was a quiet but powerful force with mutual respect and an unshakable bond. Ellen was Jim's best friend, his confidant, and his greatest love. And together they created a home filled with warmth and joy, a testament to what it means to live life with open hearts and steadfast devotion. And Jim's love extended outward to his children, Jean and Matt, and their families, including his grandchildren, Alicia, Catherine, and Avon, as well as his siblings, Patrick and his late sister, Kitty, and their families. For Jim, family was not just a responsibility, it was a source of immense pride and delight. He reveled in his grandchildren's accomplishments, and he poured his wisdom and love into their lives. And through his example, he showed his family what it meant to love deeply, to live authentically, and always put relationships first. Yet, Jim's life was never confined to his family alone. His commitment to justice and equity was a defining thread woven through his career as a lawyer and judge. And following in the footsteps of his father, Edward Kelley, he brought compassion, fairness, and innovation to the judicial system. Whether pioneering methods to help jurors cope with the stress of difficult trials or modernizing court systems to make justice more accessible, he was a trailblazer. And he didn't just uphold justice, he embodied it. As Don said, he embodied the second UU principle of justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, even before he was a UU. And he embodied the first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person in the way in which he administered justice. His work reminds us all of the dignity inherent in every person and the importance of treating others with fairness and respect. Faith was another guiding light in Jim's life. Raised Catholic, he later found a spiritual home in our Unitarian Universalist tradition. And at both the UU Church of the Quad Cities and at Cedar Lane, he offered his quiet leadership and unwavering commitment. Be it singing in the choir, working on the grounds team, or the pastoral visitors team or creating Cedar Lane's welcome garden, his actions reflected his deep belief in the power of community to help and to inspire. And music was a constant companion in Jim's life, a source of joy and connection, and from playing trumpet at Notre Dame to singing Messiah with Ellen every year, music brought him closer to others and to himself. It was a way for him to express what words would not, a love of beauty, a sense of belonging, and a connection to something greater. It's also Jim's quiet humor, and that twinkle in that eye, and that shaking of his head when he would hear a bad joke. He was one of the few who appreciated my puns. So you're mentioning that herd of turtles reminded me once when he used it, and I said something that a colleague of mine who was a punster told me, we're off like a turd of hurdles. Jim appreciated it. And then there was his love of nature, his refuge and inspiration, whether flying over landscapes as a pilot, hiking through forests, or capturing the perfect photograph. Jim saw the world with a sense of wonder and curiosity. His gardens, filled with vibrant hostas, rare conifers, and bursts of color, reflected the care and attention he brought to every aspect of his life. They were places of beauty and growth, much like the life he and Ellen cultivated together. And Jim's connection to nature extended to his final wishes, choosing a natural burial at Serenity Ridge Natural Burial Cemetery in Baltimore. There, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the earth he loved so much, Jim rests in harmony with the natural world. His choice was a reflection of the values he lived by, a life rooted in simplicity, renewal, and a deep respect to the interconnectedness of all things. And even in his later years, as health challenges reshaped his life, Jim met them with grace and resilience. The strokes that affected his speech and memory would not dim his spirit or the love he carried for those around him. Through it all, his devotion to Ellen and his family remained unwavering, a beacon of strength and courage. Jim Kelley's life was a symphony of love, service, and integrity. As a devoted husband, a loving father and grandfather, a brother and uncle, a champion of justice, a steward of the earth, and a builder of community. When great trees fall, Maya Angelou reminds us, their roots remain, nourishing the earth and those who walk upon it. Jim's roots run deep in the lives he touched, the values he upheld, and the love he shared. As we carry forward his memory, let us honor Jim by living the way he did, with a commitment to justice, a love for family, a passion for community, and an awe for the beauty of the world. May we find comfort in the shade of his memory and strength in the roots he leaves behind. Dr. Angelou concludes her poem with, "They existed." Jim Kelley existed, and because he did, we are better, stronger, kinder, and more connected. Blessed be his life, and may his legacy inspire us all. May it be so. Amen. Please rise to sing hymn number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth.
Source of all
As we depart, let us carry Jim's spirit with us, the love he gave so freely, the justice he pursued so tirelessly, the beauty he saw in music, in nature, and in life itself. May the gardens he nurtured remind us to tend to our own. May the songs he sang inspire us to lift our voices. May the lives he touched inspire us to live with purpose, integrity, and grace. And may the echoes of Jim's kindness, his courage, and his joy resound in our hearts, forever guiding us toward love. Go in peace, go making peace, living gently, loving mightily, and bowing humbly to life's great mystery. Blessed be, and amen. Please be seated for the postlude and join the family after the service in the fellowship hall.
Thank you.